The Diary of a Certified Psychopath. Off the crank. A voluntary venture, back to real life's strife, if for nothing else than to prettify my progressively gamified picture gallery with a few priceless frames of photogenic truths. Thought short and soft. In fact, about the time it took me to cover another 19 nanometer section of shared space, swerve one oblivious wood pigeon pecking at his breakfast of dry-roasted peanuts and sustainable millet beneath the augmenting glow of this midsummer's dawn, and conclude I'd made the correct decision with regard to layer composition in the face of a fresh westerly breeze that added more than its fair degree of mortal chill to our climate prophet's flattering computations. Where was I? Ah yes, thought short and soft about harnessing AI's exponentially evolving powers of accelerated productivity to compose a route that seamlessly incorporated every council-appointed cychopath around my hometown's tranquil outskirts and through its rustic heart, before arriving at the abrupt realization that this was destined to be a fragmented dream. A dream even more distant than waking up to not find my iPhone screen smothered with notifications, including the 114th promoted Twitter post advertising yet another top 10 handy websites that you never knew existed, and wish it had stayed that way, after visiting each to discover that around half were portal sites that themselves provided nothing but lists of the transient hour's most popular trends, such as the top 10 fastest ways to find out if you're entitled to compensation for mis-sold car financing schemes. Then determine if the services providing free advice on how to obtain it are themselves coordinated money-making scams conceived to exploit the impressionable minds of cash-strapped citizens already suffering from subscription-induced poverty. Goodness, safely home already. Well, that sure was the briefest and bitterest in my top 10 rusty chains of broken thought. Though on a positive stroke, the spontaneous channeling of one's negative energy can make massacring at least 10 arbitrarily imposed move goals feel almost effortless, especially when your wearable cardiologist decides to take the morning off. And returning to a paradise of pixelated pretense where the cycling infrastructure flows at a somewhat more fluid frame rate, if Strava's mortally machined motion statisticians could refine their algorithmic powers enough to execute a deep dive through such shallow data, by 2028's apocalyptic US election night, they'll have replaced every sentient political pundit that would otherwise have been paid to spin out time by overanalyzing exit polls, theoretical outcomes, and historic voting patterns during the dead-air time viewers are forced to endure between the results of critical swing states. In your exceptionally superficial case, an initial cardiological crisis stemming from your failure to decouple Professor Polar from his USB-powered defibrillator severely compromised the accuracy of readings throughout a brief spell trading toes with Coco's eco-conscious season ticket holders, travelling in a packed economy class carriage, where you also looted half a bar of liquidated assets for what your mind and muscles perceived amounted to stiff but still squeezable lactic labour, despite a strong pounding sensation in the chest. However, this was ultimately not quite easy enough to elicit any further bot-boosted drop drudging, and no sooner were monitored beats restored, shortly after Zwift's most pleasurable pain train had whisked its sizable manifest of mile-munching role-players right at Jarvis Junction, you discreetly disembarked and ticked over to the flat loop, freely mixing and mashing out 90 mostly solitary minutes in the visceral and validated Royal Navy Zone, with power just a few watts over metered parity.